by the end of this video, you're going to understand this very simple graph that I've made in order to understand the benefits of threshold intervals versus continuous tempos. As you all know, professional runners nowadays are using the threshold interval double threshold model. So hopefully you can take something away from this and implement it to your training to become a better runner. I do cover a lot of content that I haven't talked about in other threshold videos that I've already made. So this video is very important even if you've seen other threshold videos by me. I'll also include a very hidden gem clip by Steve Magnus who talks about a really easy way to get your threshold intervals in, so that's really important to watch, so make sure you watch the whole video. So we're first going to define the two types of threshold runs. They're both, again, at threshold, but one of them is continuous effort, long tempo, so you're not stopping in between. The other one is threshold intervals, where you're breaking it up into small chunks, so you get that rest in between each interval. So it's important to know that there's a time and place for both types of runs, but we'll go into what's more advantageous later. But I like to do both, and the frequency of how much you do either would depend on your pacing ability and what you're training for. So in order to understand threshold a bit better, I need to show you this graph, and this is why threshold intervals is better than continuous tempo. And it is simplified a lot, so I understand that it's not the most accurate, but it still gets my point across. The y-axis shows the blood lactate values, so how much blood lactate there is, and then the x-axis shows time throughout the run. So you can see that we're comparing two different types of runs. The first one with the squiggly lines right here, that's showing you threshold intervals, and the long line here shows you a long tempo. The pink is the time that's spent not at threshold, so above as well and below. And the green indicates where you're spending time at threshold. In a real world scenario, the green bar would be a little bit bigger because obviously that's a very small sort of threshold range. This graph is to not be confused with the other graph which shows speed at the bottom. So this isn't that typical lactate graph that you see. So try and remember that this is time at the bottom, not speed. So the first thing you need to know is that with the long tempo, because you have to be sensible for a long time, you're actually spending a lot of time not at threshold, and the final little bit is going to be spent at threshold. Whereas if you do threshold intervals, you run a little bit quicker. Like I always say, if you're doing 400 meter threshold, you're running almost like 5k pace, plus or minus how you're feeling. But that means you're raising the blood lactate levels a bit quicker, and you're getting to that threshold zone, and that rest interval in between, whether you're walking recovering or jog recovering, you get that time to decrease that lactate a tiny bit and then increase it, decrease it. So you're kind of spending more time at threshold overall. I get that that's not exactly how lactate values look like when you're doing threshold intervals, but simplified, that is kind of what's happening. So we're spending overall way more time, all this time right here at threshold compared to long tempos where we're only spending a little bit of time at threshold. So that's essentially the breakdown on why threshold intervals are better. But let's say we were to do a long tempo at the same pace as a 400 meter threshold, you're actually going to spike the lactate and you're going to be spending time above threshold. So that essentially shows you what I talk about when I'm mentioning threshold intervals versus continuous tempo. And with this graph only, it seems like threshold intervals is king, and technically it is, but there are still benefits for continuous tempos. The reason why that's important is because you're teaching yourself how to pace properly so that you don't spike the lactate too early, because if you go way too quick in a continuous tempo, you're going to be running above threshold for quite a long time, and then you'll probably burn out and then run way slower as well. So you're not really spending that much time at threshold. So for those people that are really bad in a race in terms of like they go out way too quick and they can't hang on and they blow up heavily, continuous tempos can be quite useful. So that's when you should consider doing it sometimes. But even then, if you want to build good fitness, you want to spend a lot of time at threshold. Threshold is a really good indicator for performance, and the faster you are at threshold, like velocity at threshold, the quicker you'll be in a race and you'll perform a lot better as well. That doesn't mean fixate on pace with threshold. We're just talking in general. If you can run faster at threshold compared to someone else, that's a better indicator for performance.
So basically, if we were to disregard race tactics, the person with the faster pace at lactate threshold would win the race. Anyway, let's quickly hear an announcement from Sota.
If you're enjoying this video so far and finding it helpful, definitely let me know in the comments and like this video, because all these metrics will let me know that you're enjoying it and you want more of this type of content. Also, shout out to Yoshi for this footage, it looks amazing. So I know that my videos are often quite vague because I don't want to give really specific advice because I don't know every single viewer's context, but if you want me to be a bit more specific in terms of the ratio between how often you should do threshold intervals versus continuous tempos, it still does depend on, again, how good you are at pacing. Do we need that pacing practice frequently? And also, what races are you training for? If you're training for a marathon, you're trying to hold the same pace for a long period of time. So that can be really good in terms of practice. But if you're training for a 5K, hopefully you're smart enough that you can pace a 5K well. So we're purely focused on getting the adaptations and spending more time at threshold and becoming as quick as possible. It's really important to remember that even for a 1500 and 5K, Jakobingevics and stuff are doing a ton of threshold and only sprinkling in a bit of speed. But on the other hand, when we're talking about the context of a marathon, we also want to spend a ton of time at threshold. So we don't want to just hammer continuous tempos or long tempos. We want to get a good mix of threshold intervals as well. But the difference between someone training for a 5K and a marathon could be that the threshold intervals itself, like the reps, are longer. So even if you're not doing 400 meter threshold often as a marathoner, you might do 2K threshold intervals, and you're still breaking it up and getting a bit of time where you can let the blood lactate go down a bit so that you can actually run quicker during the 2K reps instead of one continuous long 10K tempo. Again, maybe once or twice in a marathon block, it might be nice to get used to something like 10 miles in a row, like 16K straight of marathon pace or a little bit quicker to get used to that sort of pacing practice. But for the most part, doing stuff like 4x3K, 5x2K, like that sort of thing could be pretty beneficial. So now that we got the racing distance context out of the way, we can talk about the frequency of how often you should do continuous tempos versus threshold intervals. There's still no magical number because it does depend on you, but if you want my sort of opinion on how to ratio it out, maybe do one long or continuous tempo for every 3 or 4 threshold intervals as a general rule of thumb. But you can skew it in either way, as in do more threshold intervals if you feel like you're good at pacing and you don't need that pacing practice because you want to spend more time at threshold. Or if you're really bad at pacing, then you could consider doing more frequent continuous tempos. So you could do something like 2 threshold intervals and then 1 continuous tempo. So I think as a guy that's pretty good at pacing, in my opinion, like most races I go out and do my first K pretty conservative so I don't blow up. If anything, I get faster at the end of every single race most of the time, with the exception of 1 or 2 races. But for me, I don't feel like I need that pacing practice as much, so I want to get as fit as possible, so I'm hammering the threshold intervals, and I might only do 1 continuous tempo in a whole marathon block of like 16 weeks or something. Whereas other people that aren't good might need that more regular practice. Some people do threshold, 3-4 times a week, and that gives you more opportunities to play around with different types of threshold intervals and continuous tempos. So you could probably do it a bit more frequently and get that regular continuous tempo stimulus and practice. Whereas other people, if you're only doing 1 threshold session a week, the continuous tempos might only come around once a month. So yeah, a few things to consider there, like how many workouts are you doing in a week and stuff, and that sort of thing you should talk with a coach about to discuss what the best plan of action is. So coming back to this graph, now that we have this knowledge of spending more time at threshold using threshold intervals, we can actually focus on the first part of this graph as well, where we build up that lactate. So one good way to actually do threshold workouts is have a little bit of a longer tempo at the start to kind of gradually raise that lactate value. And then once you feel like you're at that sweet spot, take a little bit of a break or something, and then you can start doing the threshold intervals, because then you're already at threshold with the first rep and you're just spending the entire workout at threshold, which means that you're basically getting rid of this bit during the workout because you're doing that part in the warm-up, which is why I always talk about doing threshold in the warm-up to be really good, because of the fact that you're getting that lactate value up, we're stimulating the glycolytic system and not just relying on the aerobic system, because it's a huge shock when you're just running aerobically and then you suddenly start a race or a faster workout. You have to kind of jump almost from the aerobic system to the immediate energy system, but you want to kind of bridge that gap a little bit. Obviously, I know that all 3 energy systems work in unison, but again, I'm trying to simplify so people understand. But it's nice to just stimulate that aerobic system a little bit, work it a bit more to seep into the glycolytic system a little bit in the warm-up. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about when I do workouts and program workouts for my athletes. I want to see how I can maximize time spent at threshold by giving them a little bit of a mild tempo or something before they get into their 400 meter threshold reps. Or if I don't do that, obviously I'll give them more reps and then they use the first 3 reps to kind of build into it and then hopefully lock into the right pace for the rest of the workout. So that's kind of my mindset on that sort of thing in terms of warming up towards getting to the first rep. And on the contrary, if you have like longer reps coming up, so let's say I'm doing 5x2K as the main session today, I could do 2x400 threshold with like a short recovery jog, so 30 or 45 second jog in between to kind of prime my body, because obviously running 400 meters at threshold is quicker than 2K at threshold. So I'm raising that lactate value by doing 2 threshold reps. And then once I get to the 5x2K, I'm already at pretty much or just below threshold. So that we're spending more time at threshold rather than using the entire first 2K rep to build up the lactate value. So using threshold in the warm-up is actually a very valuable tool in your toolkit that you can use to make sure you're getting the best out of your training. Also worth quickly mentioning that I've already made a video on how to warm up before, so make sure to go check it out, link in the description. Now the final big thing that we're going to talk about in this video is how to structure or program or think of workouts that you can do for threshold. So we're talking specifically about threshold intervals mainly because continuous tempo is very basic. You just hold the same pace for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever. But when we're talking about threshold intervals, there's so many different workouts out there. And the actual reality is, it doesn't really matter what workout you do. It's good to have a variety, so different rep distances and, over time, try and decrease the rest in between and stuff like that. But as long as you have that sort of mindset, you can kind of do whatever you want and rotate through different workouts. And, you only need like 4 or 5 solid sessions that you enjoy doing that you can cycle through, unless you want to be creative and do different stuff all the time. If you've understood everything I've said in this video so far, this clip from Steve Magnus will actually resonate and make sense to you, and it actually is such a big game changer to know this thing. You actually don't need to get super fussy with the workouts. You can actually do this thing called a split threshold, and I feel like that's a really good thing that people should remember.
You can do this in a variety of ways. We used to do just straight threshold runs, meaning run 30 minutes at threshold, ride the line. It's a little riskier because you have to find that line and ride it. It's a little safer to do what I'd call just split threshold runs, which is just split it up. In actuality, I like telling athletes, hey, we're gonna spend 30 minutes at a little bit slower than threshold today. Split it up however you want. When you start feeling like you're going over the edge, take a short break. The key here is a short break because it maintains the aerobic system and doesn't let anaerobic recover as much, so we can stay on that threshold.
In terms of how I progress the threshold each week, I kind of think of it in this way. So if we start off with something like 400 meter threshold, we can kind of see how long we take to do the 400 meters. So let's say if I'm running 320 per kilometer for the 400 meter threshold reps, that's only going to take 1 minute 20 per rep. Using that 1 minute 20 that we got, we can actually bump it up to 2 minutes next time. So instead of doing a distance-based workout, next week we can do a time-based workout. So we can do something like 18 by 2 minutes or something, spend more time at threshold per rep and also overall. And then maybe that's like 2 parameters that are harder. So we can keep the rest interval the same. So that means that we're not making the recovery harder. So hopefully it's still manageable and we're kind of progressing week on week. And then see how far we travel in the 2 minutes. So let's say we travel 600 meters, for example. Then we can do a distance-based workout next week, so we can move up to like 800 meter reps or something, and you can kind of just go from there. We don't want to infinitely increase the rep distance. We want to come back to 400 meters at threshold eventually, but we can also play around with different stuff. Like we don't have to do 400 meter threshold the whole time. We can do stuff like 4x1K and then a few 400 meter threshold reps, or we can even go further down and go like 200 meter threshold reps. I used to never think that we should go below 400 meters at threshold because it's just going to be way too quick, but at the same time, there's nothing wrong with it. You could end up doing 40 by 200 if you have the patience to do that many reps. 200 meter threshold reps are going to be way quicker than 2K reps. So you're getting that biomechanical fast speed benefit as well as being at threshold still, as long as you're not hammering the 200. So if you're sensible, you can actually make the rep distances as short as you want and still get like really good gains from it. So I'm gonna start to experiment with stuff like 60 by 1 minute with like 30 second jog in between and stuff at threshold. Maybe even 100 by 30 seconds or something. I think that could be a fun workout. And I know a lot of Japanese people do it. I think that's something interesting that I've always thought about. But yeah, try and think about the parameters. So there's rep distance, there's total volume at threshold, there's rest interval, as in how long you're resting for, and whether you're jogging the recovery or walking the recovery. You can progress 1 or 2 of those parameters at a time. Don't make everything harder from one threshold workout to another, but incrementally make it harder. And if you're doing 6x1K with 90 second jog at the start of the season, later on in the season, you want to progress that to 6x1K with like 45 second jog in between. So you're trying to make it incrementally harder and not fixating on pace, because the pace will come with time, but we want to just be able to run the same effort, and that same effort in 8 weeks time is going to be faster without you having to think about it, as long as you just dial in the effort. So that's the key takeaway from this video. Again, focus on effort, not the pace. The pace will come with time, but the best way to get the pace over time is actually by doing a ton of threshold intervals and trickling in the continuous tempos. So I hope that video is helpful, guys. Make sure to leave a like and comment below what you thought of it and if you have any questions. And also, as always, I have a buy me a coffee link in the description. That just is an easy way to support the channel if you have the financial means to do so. I am a student and I always appreciate any donations. So again, thank you so much to everyone that helps out on there. This is my most recent donation. Thank you so much. But yeah, I'll see you in the next video.